Yeah, well, we don't really have anything, any agenda set up for today. In the RGov Live, I will post the link, and someone volunteer to take notes.
Yeah, I'll take notes.
We have the what is in the chat? So we have the notes from last week here, and I presume we have the same items up for discussion. Let's see what we have.
Since there's a co-op board meeting today, is the committee prepared to make any recommendations to the board? Show the board what we've been up to? So I'd like to share with the board what we've discussed about how we propose to run the vote on the respective directors' seats, uncontested versus contested, having a simple vote for or against each seat. And also, if we can look again at the hosting options for the vote, if we can make any kind of recommendation to the board there. There's also an issue that we should add to our agenda somewhere. In the past board meeting, several directors commented on the co-op ICA principles interpretation document that was created last year by the Principles and Values Working Group. In interpreting one of the co-op values, the economic participation of members, there was some wording that drew some interest from the board members, and wanted to see if this governance committee could take a look at that specific entry.
Does that have therefore an impact on GP001 as well? Because GP001 cites it. I think certainly cites the values.
The committee charter references the principles and values document from that working group.
Right. So is the idea, Ian, to sort of tighten that up or wordsmith it a bit?
Yes. So it came up in the context of the last month's board meeting when the directors approved the charter of this committee.
Oh yes, yes, I remember that now.
Right. So they agreed that this charter was a good start of what should be an evolving document, but that reference in particular didn't seem to align with standard co-op principles, and it made reference really. I mean, to me, it looked more like some support or justification for the previous bounty system, which really ran off the rails and the co-op did away with.
Right. So then I think we should put that on the agenda for the next governance meeting.
Yeah.
I've also introduced into the chat, into the records, my personal copy of GP001 that I've been looking at. And I'm sharing it with you guys now because I'm hoping that at the next meeting, so next Thursday, we can actually do some real concrete work, maybe think about both what you're saying, Ian, and GP001. So what I did was I had a long chat with Nick, and as you know, if you get into a chat with Nick, it usually is long. And I asked him, what was the ethos? Why was this created? And I tried to capture all of that in this document, and then start to go through the document to see, well, are the things in this document, are they being delivered? Really? So is the document actually delivering what the aims and objectives are of GP001? That's the point. And in some ways they are, and in some ways I'm not sure why something is the way it is. And I think it needs a bit of collaborative, what we might collectively decide that we would recommend as a governance committee. So I've had a stab in doing this, and I've added one fundamental item, which is a question of interest. So we've got topics of discussion, TODs. I've added QOIs, because as the co-op evolves, and as we learn more and more about how we work together in this highly distributed, decentralized cooperative fashion, people will want to ask questions of the various committees and of RChain as a collective. And so I introduced the notion of a question of interest alongside a topic of discussion. And a question of interest, when it goes to the relevant part of the co-op, there should be a written up answer to the question of interest if it passes muster. So I just had a crack at seeing what I would change. I wanted it to be more effective, more transparent, more inclusive, in a very obvious way, hence the question of interest. So I've given you the link now to my own copy. I didn't want to touch the original copy for the moment, because I just wanted to play around, get my own thoughts clarified about this. But I'm now at a position where I think it needs to be aired a bit more, and the right place to air it, definitely initially, is with you guys in the governance committee. And I plan, what I'd like to do is, along with your suggestion, Ian, of looking at the values and that stuff, I would really like to come to the AGM with some concrete proposals that derive from these things, from the governance committee. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I've changed this to GP001A so we can distinguish it.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure I'm really clear on.
So I've done a series of question and answers at the front, because it's when you read a proposal like GP001, you need to capture ultimately why has this thing come into being? What are we trying to achieve? And then after those questions and answers, it's like an FAQ at the top of it. Then you can actually see what the member proposed topic of discussion and GP001 is about, and understand why. Because the difficulty is that you're at the background bit, and the purpose bit doesn't really capture why did this document come into being.
Right. I mean,
that's why I had such a long conversation with Nick in order to capture it. And I've shared the wording with Nick at the top, right at the top, about what it should be. And he was kind of happy enough with that. So now I'm just sharing it with you guys to get your thoughts. It doesn't mean that the FAQ bit at the top stays in the document. It's just a work in progress. It just keeps us focused on the right things. The only thing in the actual proposal that I've changed or added really is this notion of a question of interest. That members have the right to ask questions of the board and all of the committees that live within the RChain ecosystem and the executives. Members have the right to ask questions. And if enough members want to ask a question, we have a duty of care to answer that formally. And I wanted to put that in as well, and not just make it a topic of discussion. Topic of discussion is not the same as a question. and usually I think what happens is a question of interest precedes a topic of discussion. Now, I could be over-engineering this, and you may all hate it. That's fine. But I'm just sort of introducing it at the moment. What I'd really like to do is carve out time to see if we can craft this further and come to some sort of conclusion, ideally next Thursday.
I like everything you said, Steve. I think it all sounds very logical. Yes, we will definitely need some time to read through it and digest it.
One of the sort of backdrops to this, of course, which you may have noticed in the press, is the madness of our parliament. But oddly enough, the madness of our parliament in the UK and the back and forth and the use of procedures, I kind of want a co-op that doesn't have that subterfuge. I want it to be much more transparent than Parliament appears to be. And I think this GP001, as I read it, I thought it was a brilliant start. I've just widened the notion. And there may be other things that you guys come up with too.
What's our deadline again if this is going to become an IOB?
I'll have to check. Hang on a minute.
Ian, do you have that handy?
Well, IOBs need to be submitted by September 15th, but this committee can submit recommendations to the board at any time. The IOB is a mechanism for the membership to get items onto the ballot for the annual election.
Right. So I think there's enough time to, part of what I want to do, which I think would be a great thing, a great response, and shows that the co-op's growing up and that control is now starting to be in the right part. What's the word I'm trying? Decentralized. Control is being more decentralized in the right way with all of the mechanisms of process that we want to have this as transparent and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So by taking this to the AGM and submitting it as an item of business,
right,
I think it's a great show of the strength of the co-op in our belief that we're following the right model, even though we know we're not there yet. We're prepared to undergo that change and be reflective about it.
Yeah, I agree that, put on the ballot, that's something that every participating member will see.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing it by sort of like just putting it into the board, and then the board sort of magically may decide, oh yes, we'll do that.
It's not public enough.
That's right, it's not.
Right.
And I think this did come from the members, and we really need to respect that and say, we have pulled one out here and we've all worked on this. So we've really taken on board what the members said. Mm-hmm. So I think we can do something that's good enough for the 15th, as long as we're happy enough with it. And we might put some words about, being open to how we work and being open to suggestions as to how we can.
Oh, you faded off a bit, Steve.
In the world, so yeah, I'm just saying it's all new. We're all sort of virgins in this process because nobody's really ever done this before.
I'm wondering, speaking of IOBs, what this committee's role is regarding the IOBs that may be submitted before September 15th. Does this committee help to shape those IOBs, or
that's a good question.
Filter them in any way?
Because if you look at GP001 and the topics of discussion, what we're effectively saying to the members is, this is what you need to submit. Here's a format that makes it easy for somebody to decide whether that goes further. And who's that somebody that decides? The governance committee. The governance committee in GP001 acts as the traffic cop. So I think, point well taken, I think that's what we should do, regardless of any formal processes and procedures. I think that's what we should do, and let that be known to the members that
We've lost you, Steve.
up to the Governance Committee to see if we think it has a, that it's worthy. They should responses, both in terms of receipt of what they send and any advice and guidance that we can give as individual members of the Governance Committee.
Steve, you're coming in and out, and we've lost probably the last 45 seconds or
if we
so.
feel that's needed. But I think we should act as that resource. So I'll type.
Okay, I guess the bottom line on GP001 is that was sort of an implementation of the IOB4 from last year to member participation. The way I see our responsibilities here come largely from the special meeting 19A, where members participated. They brought up issues, they brought up ideas. There's really 12 issues that were entered in the special meeting 19A. From those 12 issues, in my reading of them, the main one that needs action is, or the main one that would involve action would be the GP001. It's not clear that I don't know if anyone feels any other issues there deserve our putting those forward from the membership to the board or to the I guess the one area that I thought we might have some responsibility is in looking at the restrictions on the rock sales that were indicated by GP005. I mean, IOB 05 last year. And I was wondering if there was a responsibility to revoke some of those restrictions in the meeting this year, in order that the co-op has the flexibility to fund the continuing activities of maintaining RChain through Mercury onto Venus.
Yeah, I think that's regards to IOB5, Jim, that you're referencing. I kind of get the impression that the board might be trying to address that prior to the AGM.
Well, I think the aspect of it that's been discussed by the board, and it's in the minutes, is the option of opening up some of the reserve wallet, or moving rock out of the reserve wallet into the sales wallet. And so a proposal like that may even be presented today in the board meeting. I'm not sure. That's why the board's or the co-op's council was consulted about for a legal opinion on how holding more than 50% of the tokens would affect the security status of the tokens. So, but that's just one aspect of IOB5, which goes much further in outlining the monetary policy of the co-op. So, where the board is looking to make some small modification in the short term, much of IOB5 is based on outdated estimates and a very different co-op than what we have today. So it's worth changing. I'm just not sure who to involve or what the best process to updating it might be.
Yeah, and I think that this is going to get discussed at the board meeting. I'm pretty sure of that. It would be, so here's my dilemma. I always have a dilemma with this one. So there's the securities issue, which we know about, but there is this other issue about using some more rock as a means of gaining additional investment money to grow the co-op and stabilize it and all the rest of it post mainnet. And we know that's coming. And I think all the members know that that's coming. The two do run side by side. There is a relationship, and all that Ian said is absolutely right. I think as a governance committee, I would, if I was the CEO and president of RChain right now, I would have asked the governance committee to come up with recommendations and have them input to this very board meeting. But it's too late to do that for this board meeting. However, it could depend. I don't know what the discussion is going to be tonight on the board. It could be that some relaxation of IOB 5 takes place, and we could make it contingent on the governance committee's input before that can be finalised. What concerns me is if you change IOB 5 for anything other than the security issue, the security classification, if you change anything else, there will be hands raised. And I kind of want to avoid, there's still going to be hands raised whatever happens with IOB 5. But I kind of want that to be mitigated in some way by asking something like the governance committee to take a look prior to perhaps final ratification. Don't know, Ian. I mean, you know a lot about this as well, so I'd be curious to know what you think and what the rest of you guys think.
I think that we need some help and some further expertise in framing this or revising this monetary policy. I'm not an economist, and I think we need to reach out to members and others to help us put together a monetary policy that really makes sense, not one that's based on very outdated estimates. I think that last year's monetary policy, it just went too far based on very flimsy data. The intention was spot on, but it just doesn't ring. It's not true for today's situation.
Yeah, I think
maybe
I think
that's
specifically it was based on what, 25 cents or 35 cents of value for rock, and the financial assumptions that follow that. And I think the issue now, or at least something that Greg has mentioned, is that the burning of the rock essentially would curtail the financial freedom or options or runway that we might have. Is that part of the reason beyond the SEC issue?
Exactly.
Well,
I think, that perhaps the mandate to review and revise the policy based on the kind of expertise we would need to do that might itself be an item of business. If we can't come up with the answers, at least we can create a mandate from the membership to review and revise the monetary policy.
Now, so the monetary policy is a new item, or is that an IOB 5 item? I mean, it seems to me that the monetary policy is probably an ongoing thing we need to have.
well, IOB 5 addressed several components of monetary policy. So, I mean, we could even rename, IOB 5 spoke to monetary policy of the co-op and set up some rules. Some of those rules were quite specific and need to be revisited based on the current situation.
And
yeah, go ahead, Bill.
well, I was just going to say that I get the impression that there's a timing urgency to get some modification to IOB 5 done, so that there is more of the Treasury made available to help fund the continuation of the project. Now, assuming that's the case, then perhaps what could be done is, say the board discusses this matter today, then if the board then, say, proposes that the membership, well, they have to get something out to the membership about that. And perhaps the governance committee could be a means of collecting opinion and statements from the membership, and you give them a time frame by which those opinions and statements could be sent to the governance committee. The governance committee could be the committee then that collects it and then passes that back to the board, say within a week's time. I don't know, I'm just playing with a date, but say within a week's time to get that back to the board, and then the board can then pull a special meeting together in which they then debrief and perhaps resolve what they want to do.
I think that sounds great. That also gives a little break to my friend Steve Ross Talbot here, who's on the board and could perhaps even today be asked to make a decision about modifications to IOB 5. And the question will come up as to the urgency for that change, whether it needs to be made today in a board meeting or wait until the annual meeting. So it could help smooth that wrinkle out.
I mean, I think that there might be, because at the board we'll try to quantify the level of urgency, by which I mean, if Greg, for instance, says, my level of urgency is $1 million worth, then I know what I'm playing with. I might ask questions about the $1 million, but $1 million worth. What I don't want is the entire rest of the rock reserves to be unleashed. So if the urgency is quantifiable in a time frame between now and the board and the AGM, I want to give Greg and the executives that flexibility, but no more. And I want the members to then consider what they want the monetary policy to be going forward. And for me, the governance committee is the perfect foil in the board for myself and Ian to say, well, look, because we've both been nervous about IOB 5 in those board meetings. So it's a perfect foil for us to say, hey, look, we'll give you the flexibility you need between now and the AGM. Give you that, right? We'd vote in favour of that as a one-off special thing. And at the same time, we will request what you guys have said about the governance committee.
So does this mean that the governance committee would shape an IOB that could be put forward to the members in the election?
We couldn't hear you, Steve, if you were talking.
Oh.
Well, I think Steve was proposing that for basically anything that comes from the community that we shepherd and help those things to become IOB ready, right? So the same would apply to this one, perhaps.
You got disconnected there.
Yeah, he's now disconnected. He's not.
Yeah, I think that is the shape of it. That the committee helped form an IOB that addresses this so the membership can weigh in, and that modifications to the previous vote are fully endorsed by the membership and not just seen as coming down from above by the board.
I agree with the expression of trying to find out what our degree of urgency is in terms of quantifying it. I don't think we should quantify it in terms of dollars. We should quantify it in terms of percentage of our assets, and that would be really the percentage of the rock we want to free up to address IOB 5. The percentage of how much we've got left is a truer measure of where we stand, no matter what the price of rock is, because that's still the true fraction of what assets we have left at any time. That's just a thought. I wanted to throw it out there. Reject it if you'd like. I'd like to hear the rejection, or go meh. I don't care.
Well, for a long time, Greg Meredith has been saying that the ideal percent holdings of the co-op should be 30% to 1/3 of the token supply. So that's the target that he's spoken about for a while.
So where are we now?
We're over 50%.
So we get rid of the difference between 1/3 and 50%, and that could we assume that that's a fair stab at the degree of urgency?
Well, the urgency comes from the regulatory risk of the token being seen as a security because of the concentration of holdings and the control held by the co-op, and also just the financial, the need to fund the operations of the co-op and continue the development of the platform.
Yeah, so I guess I'm, in terms of SEC, we need to be less than 50%. That's the only requirement, I think, from an SEC angle. Is that correct?
I think that's the gist of the opinion that.
Legal opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So from the SEC perspective, we need to be less than 50%. And then we do need funds for the operational runway. I think those two are, I would say, urgent. And the things beyond that maybe are something that perhaps there is room for membership to weigh in on or speak to, because the rest of it really is going to become operational runway on a going basis. Next 2, 3, whatever number, 5 years, whatever it is, whatever time frame we're looking at. That is also a concern. So I think that once we take all of that, what's left is going to be really probably there is room for discussion on that. That's how I'm seeing that. Is that correct or no?
Are you asking, Rao?
I'm just generally asking, is that a fair way to characterize? Because I'm trying to say, like, where is the room for public input, meaning what information do we have to provide them for them to make a reasonable comment or reasonable suggestion, right? So there is the immediate, what do we do with the stuff above 50%? And then what do we need for operations for an extended period of time, not just 2 months, 3 months, or 6 months, but more like in my mind, at least a 3 to 5 year time frame. And I think then the thing that Ian is talking about, how much is left between that and the 33% or whatever, if that's the right number, is probably up for discussion. That's how I'm thinking about that. Does that make sense to people, or am I not making sense?
Well, I'm not even sure I can quite summarize your point, Rao.
Okay.
I see it as an issue of, is there some recommendation that we make in terms of reviewing the IOB 5 requirements today as an IOB for the membership in October? I mean, it might be helpful for us to make some resolution that we send to the board today to review the IOB 5 requirements in the face of changing situations or something like that. Although, no, that may not be necessary. It's just something that you do.
Right. I mean, the other thing is whether we're in a position to make any such things. I think they already either have it on their agenda or not. I mean, do we need more analysis and discussion among ourselves to create a proposal like that. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm leaning towards maybe we do, but
So what would be the shape of the proposal? I hear something for the short term, which is some guidance or recommendation to the board as to an immediate change, prior to the AGM in IOB5, and then also the desire to update the monetary policy to meet the current the co-op's current situation. Because there's quite a bit more to IOB5 than just the contents of the different wallets. There's a whole release schedule. We'd have to break down the various components.
yeah. So Steve is saying that the governance committee can examine a new monetary policy and feedback into the board, including, I'm assuming, in there the feedback from the members.
Do we need
Exactly.
to take, I'm sorry, Ralph, do we need to take a look at IOB5 and come up with it and make changes to it and then give that to the board as our recommendation? And then from that, they can come back with a final proposal
Are you talking about today, or are you talking about at some point in time?
as soon as possible? Would that suffice? I'm not saying, can we do it? I'm saying, would that be a way to make a proposal to the board from this committee? With us taking a naive look at the situation and all the urgencies, and we being the committee, would that be a sufficient way to provide a recommendation to the board?
Yeah, whether or not we would have, how specific it would be an issue. But I mean, in terms of reviewing reviewing it and getting feedback from the membership.
Yeah, and at least take a look at all the different implications to making a change in we've all been assuming that we can't actually do this. I'm not sure it's even possible legally. I mean, within the constraints of the co-op governance.
Well, we can make any kind of recommendations. I was thinking that, if the governance committee made some vague recommendation as to the changing conditions and reconsideration of the IOB status and getting feedback from the membership, et cetera, that sort of gives the action more of a bottom up rather than top down impetus, at least somewhat more. I mean, we can just resolve and vote on whether IOB5 terms need to be reconsidered. Maybe that's enough so that the board action can be considered given from the governance committee.
I second the motion.
Shall we spell it out? Give some reasons why we feel that way? Because I agree that should be helpful.
Jim, could you type it in formally and then we can critique it before we vote on it?
Let's see.
And please do read the stuff in chat, because part of it is happening in the chat.
Yeah, I don't know that I can say it any better than anybody else here. I mean, I was just saying basically that as a result of changing economic conditions, how about RChain's changing economic conditions, should we say, including the value
I'm thinking the things that have changed besides the crypto winter and the devaluation of the token. We've had a complete realignment of between the co-op and its partners. I mean, we're no longer aligned with Pythia or Reflective Ventures. We no longer have the marketing group or the bounty system. I mean, much has changed.
That's the best I can do.
Well, did someone write one? Oh. Where was I typing? Yes, I thought I was typing at the bottom. I was typing at the bottom of the page, not the bottom of the notes. Oh well.
Yeah, Steve, I think that kind of wraps it.
Yeah. So this is
Yeah, with Ian. And I really want to say to them, hey, look, we're ahead of the curve here. We know IOB 5 is outdated and we want to help. And by doing that in a public way, it means that the board and the executives on the board are being supported, as opposed to them, as what usually happens is they run too quick and then we catch up with them. I want to run quicker than them this time.
Yeah. And Steve, when you're in that, when you're in that meeting today, if you could really try to get the urgency topic pinpointed, both in terms of what the status of the Treasury itself, and then also if there's urgency and getting down to that 30% or between 30 and 50% or below 50%, what's the urgency in doing that? Because we need to know those things.
I will find out. Yeah, absolutely. I shall find out. So I'm going to have to disappear in literally in a minute. I will be hanging out on GP001 for a little while over the course of now to the next Thursday, because I've been massaging Greg on this one quite a lot, and actually I've got a call with him after the board meeting on this topic. So I'm trying to bring him along on this. So I just need to do a bit of prep on that and for the board. So I'm going to dial off now.
Now, are we going to vote on a resolution here? Or?
Oh, yeah. So
yeah, there's that also, Steve. I wanted to remind you, I think you took on an action item some time ago about a template for an IOB that we were going to give the membership. Where or way do you need any help on that?
I may do, and oddly enough, it's potentially related to GP001 because there's a template in there for raising topics of discussion.
Right.
So yes, I mean, I'll be working on all this stuff tomorrow. So if you might see me on the document, in which case ping me. Right, it'd be nice to have a chat, really. Okay. So yeah, definitely. I'll look for you in my afternoon, my time, any of you. So I'll be on Discord. It would actually be good to have a bit of a working session so that we can chat a bit as well about the things that are concerning us and things that we need to get done, and just sort of be a bit supportive of each other rather than just the once a week thing. So I'm available, so I'll be around.
Okay, great.
Should we do a vote and then close? And also, last year's IOB5 template is up on the Discord channel for IOB5. We can easily amend that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see, Steve, you've proposed this, what we have written here. Given the economic conditions, the committee feels that the current monetary policy described in IB5 is now outdated, needs to be realigned. As such, we urge the board to start a process with us to realign. So I second that. Who here is a voting member?
I would just say, is anyone opposed?
I'm for it. I'm not sure where that is, but.
Okay.
I am sure. I am sure what it is, and I'm for it.
Well, I'll tell you. I can't right now, but I'll tell you a funny story about the whole Brexit thing that's happened, because there was an amendment that was passed accidentally. I can't believe that. They passed an amendment to a major bill to stop Brexit accidentally. That's another story. So I got to go, guys. So thanks very much.
All right,
and maybe I'll see you guys around tomorrow.
Okay, we'll see you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Steve.
Yeah,
Cheers.
bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Okay, can we close the meeting here?
Yeah, but can we put on under the note that it was resolved with no one objecting?
I think we need to name everyone who voted. I mean, we're all members of the committee here. Or do we have any visitors, any guests?
I was invited to join this meeting. I think that suffice. I mean, to join this committee. I am on the nominations committee, but I don't know if I'm actually voting on this one, so I'll say if it matters, my vote is conditional based on whether or not I'm a member or not, and it is in favor.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if we have it officially written somewhere, but Gary was, I think, asked to serve on this committee.
Okay, I know there are chartered there are member. So the charter itself names the members, and the board voted to approve that charter.
Okay.
And we can definitely perhaps we can recommend to an amendment to the charter to add Gary. I wish we could do that today, but Steve has already left. But I'd be in favor of that.
I could be wrong, but I think there is some wording that allows members to be added by consent
Okay.
of the members.
So
Yeah.
if that is the case, why don't we just take a consent vote anyway while we're here? And then if that suffices, it suffices. If not,
You can say approved by all members present, and if we have a log of who was here, then that should do it.
okay.
Okay.
So that's a separate item to add Gary Coulter to the board. I mean, committee.
Mhm.
There's my document.
Okay, I need to drop off and open another meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got to go to the same meeting,
Okay. All right. Well.
and I need a minute.
All right. See you there. Thank you.
What's
All
the
right, see you
number of
guys.
that, Ian?
Sorry.
What's the number of that Zoom?
No. It's for the it's a co-op staff meeting for people in the operations.
Yeah, it's not. It's in 2 hours that we meet again, or 1 hour.
For the nominating committee, that's in an hour, I believe.
All right. See you then.
Okay. Look forward to it.
All right, I guess we're done.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Later.
See you in the nominations committee.